beginning of Aldous Huxley Island, the novel, to see what's in it. Whatever's in it must be in it. What's in it's in it. Whatever's in it. 1862. In framing an ideal, we may assume what we wish, but should avoid impossibilities. Aristotle. Chapter 1. Attention, a voice began to call. It was as though an oboe had suddenly become articulate. Attention, it repeated in the same high nasal monotone. Attention. Lying there like a corpse in the dead leaves, his hair matted, his face grotesquely smudged and bruised, his clothes in rags and muddy. Will Farnaby awoke with a start. Molly had called him. Time to get up. Time to get dressed. Mustn't be late at the office. Thank you, darling, he said and sat up. A sharp pain stabbed at his right knee, and there were other kinds of pains in his back, his arms, his forehead. Attention, attention, the voice insisted without the slightest change of tone, leaning on one elbow. Will looked at him and saw with bewilderment not the gray wallpaper and yellow curtains of his London bedroom, but a glade among trees and the long shadows and slanting lights of early morning in a forest. Attention, attention. Why did she say attention? Attention, attention, the voice insists. How strangely, how senselessly. Molly, he questioned. Molly, the name seemed to open a window inside his head. Suddenly, with that horribly familiar sense of guilt at the pit of his stomach, he smelt formaldehyde. He saw the small, brusque nurse hurrying ahead of him along the green corridor. Heard the dry creaking of her starched clothes. Number 55, she was saying, and then halted, opened a white door. He entered, and there, on a high white bed, was Molly with bandages covering half her face and the mouth hanging cavernously open. Molly, he had called. Molly. His voice had broken and was crying. He was crying and was imploring, my darling. There was no answer, though the gaping mouth, the quick shallow breaths came noisily again and again. My darling, and then suddenly the hand he was holding came to life for a moment, then was still again. It's me, he said. It's Will. Once more the fingers stirred suddenly with what was evidently an enormous effort. They closed themselves over his own, pressed here for a moment, then relaxed again into lifelessness. Attention, called the inhuman voice. Attention. It had been an accident, he hastened to assure himself. The road was wet. The car had skipped across the white line. It was one of those things that happen all the time. The papers are full of them. They had reported them by the dozen. Mother and 3 children killed in a head-on crash. But that was beside the point. The point was that when she asked him if it was really the end, he had said yes. The point was that less than half an hour after she had walked out from that last shameful interview into the rain, Molly was in an ambulance, dying. He hadn't looked at her as he turned to go, hadn't dared to look at her. Another glimpse of that pale, suffering face might have been too much for him. She had risen from her chair and was suddenly moving slowly across the room, moving slowly out of his life. Shouldn't he call her back and ask her forgiveness, tell her that he still loved her? Had he ever loved her? For the 100th time, the articulate oboe called him to attention. Yes, had he ever really loved her? Goodbye, Will, came her remembered whisper as she turned back on the threshold, and then it was she who had said it in a whisper from the depths of her heart. I still love you, Will, in spite of everything. A moment later, the door of the flat closed behind her, almost without a sound, the little dry click of the latch, and she was gone. He had jumped up, had run to the front door and opened it, had listened to the retreating footsteps on the stairs like a ghost at cockcrow. A faint, familiar perfume lingered vanishingly on the air. He closed the door again, walked into his gray and yellow bedroom and looked out the window. A few seconds passed, then he saw her crossing the pavement and getting into the car. He heard the shrill grinding of the starter once, twice after that, the drumming of the motor. Should he open the window? Oh, wait, Valley, wait, he heard himself shouting in imagination. The window remained unopened. The car began to move, turned the corner, and the street was empty. It was too late. Too late, thank God, said a gross, derisive voice. Thank God. Yes, thank God. And yet, the guilt was there at the pit of his stomach, the guilt, the gnawing of his remorse. But through the remorse, he could feel a horrible rejoicing. Somebody, low and lewd and brutal, somebody alien and odorous who was yet himself, was gleefully thinking that now there was nothing to prevent him from having what he wanted. And what he wanted was a different perfume, was the warmth and resilience of a younger body. Attention. Attention, said the oboe. Yes, attention, attention to Bab's murky bedroom with its strawberry pink alcove and the two windows that looked into the Charing Cross Road and were looked into all night long by the winking glare of the big sky sign for Porter's Gin on the opposite side of the street. Gin in royal crimson, and for 10 seconds the alcove was the Sacred Heart. For 10 miraculous seconds, the flushed face, so close to his own, glowed like a seraphim, transformed as though by an inner fire of love. Then came the yet profound transfiguration of darkness. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh God, make it go on forever. But punctually at the count of 10, the electric clock would turn on. Another revelation, but of death, of the horrible, essential horror. For the lights this time were green, and for 10 hideous seconds, Bab's rosy alcove became a womb of mud, and on the bed, Babs herself was corpse-colored, a cadaver, galvanized into posthumous epilepsy. When Porter's Gin proclaimed itself in green, it was hard to forget what had happened and who one was. The only thing to do was to shut one's eyes and plunge, if one could, more deeply into the other world of sensuality. Plunge, violently plunge, deliberately into those alienating frenzies into which poor Molly, attention in her bandages, Molly in her wet grave of Highgate. And Highgate, of course, was why one had to shut one's eyes each time, and when the green light made a corpse of Bab's nakedness, had always so utterly been a stranger, and not only Molly behind her closed eyelids. Will saw his mother, pale like a cameo, her face spiritualized by accepted suffering, her hands made monstrous and subhuman by arthritis, his mother, and standing behind her wheelchair, already running too fat and quivering like calf's foot jelly with all the feelings that had never found the proper expression in consummated love, was his sister Maud. How are you, Will? Yes, how are you? Maud echoed cheerfully in her vibrating contralto. There was no answer, no answer, that was to say, in any words that could be uttered in their presence, that those two martyrs, the mother and her unhappy marriage, the daughter to filial piety, could possibly understand no answer except in words of the most obscenely scientific objectivity, the most inadmissible frankness. How could he do it? How he could do it, for all practical purpose, was compelled to do it, because Babs had certain physical peculiarities which Molly did not possess, and behaved at certain moments in ways which Molly would have found unthinkable. There had been a long silence, but now abruptly the strange voice took up its old refrain. Attention, attention, attention to Molly, attention to Maud and his mother, attention to Babs, and suddenly another memory emerged from the fog of vagueness and confusion. Bab's strawberry pink alcove sheltered another guest, and its owner's body was shuddering ecstatically under somebody else's caresses. To the guilt in the stomach was added an anguish about the hard constriction of the throat. Attention. The voice had come nearer and was calling from somewhere over there to the right. He turned his head and he tried to raise himself for a better view, but the arm that supported his weight began to tremble, then way back, and he fell back onto the leaves, too tired to go on remembering. He lay there for a long time, staring up through half-closed lids at the incomprehensible world around him. Where was he, and how on earth had he got here? Not that this was of any importance at the moment. Nothing was of any importance except his pain, this annihilating weakness. All the same, just a matter of scientific interest. This tree, for example, under which, for no known reason, he found himself lying. This column of gray bark with the groaning high up and sun-speckled branches, this ought by rights to be a beech tree, but in that case, and Will admired himself for being so lucidly logical. In that case, the leaves had no right to be so obviously green, evergreen. And why would a beech tree send its roots elbowing up like this above the surface of the ground, and those prosperous wooden buttresses on which the pseudo beech supported itself? Where did those fit into the picture? Will remembered suddenly his favorite, worst line of poetry. Who, quote, who propped, thou asked, in these bad days my mind? Quote, answer, congealed ectoplasm, early Dolly, which definitely ruled out the chilterns. So did the butterflies, swooping out there in the thick buttery sunshine. Why were they so large, so improbably cerulean or velvet black, so extravagantly eyed and freckled, purple staring out of a chestnut, silver powdered over emerald, over topaz, over sapphire? The first part of the novel Island by a modern classic, Harper Perennial, by Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World, one of the 99 best modern novels. He's talking about Brave New World, probably.